A cheetah can outrun almost anything on four legs, but when hyenas close in on her cubs, she doesn't roar. She chirps. High, thin, 500. Almost bird-like. So unexpected that field researchers hearing it for the first time have genuinely mistaken it for a bird calling somewhere in the bush. 500. And that tiny sound is the clue to one of the strangest evolutionary decisions in the animal kingdom. The answer isn't about courage or strength. It's hidden inside a single small bone in the throat. 500. And once you understand what that bone does, you'll never think of the cheetah, or of what actually makes a big cat big the same way again. 500. To stand beside a cheetah is to understand instantly why people lump it in with lions and tigers. The narrow waist, the black tear streaks running from eye to jaw. 500. The deep chest built around lungs that process oxygen closer to a racehorse's than a house cat's. Everything about it screams elite predator. In 3 seconds, it can hit over 100 kilometers an hour. 500. Its spine flexes like a bow with every stride. Its semi-retractable claws grip the earth like football studs. 500. But give this animal the one thing lions and tigers are famous for: a roar. And the physical machinery for it simply isn't there. The explanation starts, unglamorously, 500, with a bone called the hyoid, a small structure that anchors the base of the tongue and larynx, just below the jaw. In lions, tigers, 500. Jaguars and leopards, the classic roaring cats of the genus Panthera. Part of that structure isn't rigid bone, but flexible, elastic tissue, letting the larynx hang loose and vibrate at low, rolling frequencies. 500. It's one of the leading explanations biologists point to for why those four cats can produce a true roar. In cheetahs, that same structure is fully bone, rigid and fixed, the same basic setup found in domestic cats. 500. Cougars and lynxes. That anatomy is associated with the inability to produce the deep roar of the Panthera cats. Unlike the roaring cats, 500, cheetahs can produce the continuous purring sounds characteristic of smaller cats. The cheetah didn't lose the ability to roar somewheres along the way. 500. Its lineage simply evolved along a different anatomical path, one that never produced the roaring machinery of Panthera. That single fact quietly demolishes a much bigger assumption. For most of the 20th century, 500, cheetahs were treated as some sprint-adapted cousin of the lion, a smaller, faster member of the same club. Genetic sequencing told a different story entirely. 500. The cheetah's closest living relatives aren't lions or leopards. They're the puma and the far smaller jaguarundi of the Americas, animals it hasn't shared a common ancestor with for millions of years. 500. It looks like a big cat because speed on open plains favors a certain build, not because it shares their vocal engineering. Evolution gave it the silhouette of one lineage and the throat of another. 500. And welded the two together into something genuinely its own. But the throat wasn't the strangest thing researchers found when they went looking. In the 1980s, geneticists at the U.S. National Cancer Institute, 500, led by Stephen O'Brien, began investigating why cheetahs bred so poorly in captivity and suffered unusually high rates of disease. And then they ran an experiment that should have produced a very different result. 500. They transplanted patches of skin between unrelated cheetahs, a procedure that, in almost any other species, triggers immune rejection within days, because the immune system is built to detect genetic difference. 500. The grafts weren't rejected. Genetically, unrelated cheetahs were behaving like identical twins. The evidence pointed to a severe population bottleneck thousands of years ago. 500, leaving modern cheetahs with extraordinarily little genetic diversity. Every cheetah alive today descended from a small surviving population. 500, carrying an inherited genetic sameness almost unheard of outside a laboratory colony. Some researchers link the timing to the upheavals at the end of the last ice age, though the exact cause remains a hypothesis. 500, not a settled fact. That genetic thinness isn't a side note to the roar mystery, it's the other half of the same story. A roar is a claim of territory backed by the physical ability to defend it. 500. Lions can afford to make that claim because, in a straight fight, they usually win one. A cheetah, at barely half a lion's weight, with a lightweight skeleton built for acceleration rather than combat, cannot. 500. And for an animal already built around avoiding injury, that genetic fragility makes the cost of a mistake even harder to survive. 500. Long-term studies on the Serengeti suggest cheetahs lose a substantial share of their kills outright to lions, hyenas, and leopards. They eat fast and abandon the carcass rather than risk a fight. 500. A torn tendon that a lion could shrug off is often a death sentence for an animal that survives entirely on its legs. So the evolutionary bet went the opposite direction from confrontation, toward speed. 500. Toward avoidance. Toward a body so specialized for flight that it sacrificed nearly every tool for a fight, including the sound of one. Seen this way. 500. The chirp stops sounding like a limitation and starts sounding like a strategy. It isn't a threat display at all. It's coordination. Mothers locating scattered cubs. Siblings regrouping after a hunt gone wrong. 500. A vocabulary built for cooperation, not intimidation, and one still poorly understood. Researchers are only beginning to map how many distinct calls cheetahs actually use and what each one means. 500. The myth of the weaker big cat gives way to something more precise. An animal that traded the ability to roar for the ability to outrun almost anything that might ever need roaring at. 500. Every piece of it points the same direction: the rigid hyoid, the featherweight skeleton, the bottlenecked genome, the bird-like call. Not scattered oddities, but one coherent answer to a single question. 500. What does survival look like for an animal that cannot afford to fight? Which brings us back to that mother in the grass, hyenas closing from 3 directions. Nothing between her cubs and disaster, but a thin 500. High call. She will not roar tonight or any night, not because something was lost along the way. 500. But because thousands of years of narrow genetics and millions of years of separate anatomy built her for an entirely different kind of survival, one measured in seconds and strides, not volume and threat. 500. She isn't failing to be a lion. She never was one. She is succeeding completely at being a cheetah, and once you've heard that chirp for what it actually is, not a missing roar. 500. But a sound built for a different fight entirely. It's hard to call the fastest animal on Earth powerless again,